Hello and welcome to Fortress Alaska. I'm your host Dave, and today we're going to be talking about the truth about the 357 Sig, the cartridge I'm holding in my hand. Note, it is a bottleneck cartridge which aids in feeding. Its parent case is the 10mm, not like the 40 I said before. That was a misspeak on my part, but yes, I do know the parent case is the 10mm. It headspaces on the case mouth, not on the shoulder like most rifles. It does headspace on the case mouth. It is slightly longer than a 40 Smith & Wesson. Here we have a 40 Smith & Wesson. You can see there that the case is just a little bit longer. Not much, but just enough to make a difference. It has an operating pressure of 40,000 psi. It is definitely a stout cartridge to fire. It was developed in 1994 as a joint effort between Sig Arms and Federal Cartridge. The design idea was to get a semi-auto cartridge that would fit in a standard 9mm sized handgun that is equal to the 357 Magnum I have here. So that was the design intent, and they got pretty close. It is a little bit weaker than a 357 Magnum, but if you're on the receiving end, you won't notice the difference. Its standard rifling twist is 1 in 16, and its typical loadout is 125 grains at 1400 feet per second, which yields about 568 foot-pounds of energy. So I have it here in comparison for size. So here's our 357 Sig. Here we have the 10mm, 357 Magnum, 44 Magnum. Down on the small end, we have the 380 ACP, 9mm, the 45 ACP, the 40 Smith & Wesson, then back to the 357 Sig. Basically, I got them in order of power. People debate which is more powerful, the 10mm or the 357 Magnum. In my experience, you can always find a 357 Magnum that'll beat a 10mm. And with hand loads with strong revolvers, you can really outdo a 10mm. Anyway, so there are the cartridges for comparison. So now let's talk about a few things in more detail. So one of the perks of a bottleneck cartridge is it feeds easier, because as you can see here, the case mouth and the bullet diameter is significantly smaller than the chamber, which means it'll drop in a lot easier. So when you're feeding, you have a smaller diameter bullet going into a bigger diameter hole. So that makes it feed easier. Now, most modern handguns are utterly reliable, but any advantage you can get is a good advantage. For comparison, this is a 40 Smith & Wesson. As you can see, there's no play in there. It's the same size as it goes in. So it is, as soon as it starts going in, you can feel resistance because it has to go against it. Whereas this, it has to go in quite a ways before the actual diameter of the case matches the diameter of the chamber. So that's one of the advantages of a bottleneck cartridge, and one of the advantages of the 357 Sig. Another advantage, as you can see by this magazine, it is labeled for both 40 and 357 Sig. So you only need one set of magazines if you have guns chambered in both that use the same magazine. So you can see you could, in theory, mess up and load both at the same time, but if you're like me, when you're shooting 357 Sig out of your gun, you only have 357 Sig ammo on the table. But both load easily into the magazine. The magazines interchange. This is a Sig P229 magazine, and it will work in either a 357 or a 40 Smith & Wesson gun, and the only difference between the two is the barrel. The very first production gun in 357 Sig was the Sig P229. It was specifically designed for the 357 Sig. It is a double action, single action pistol, which means it has to be cocked for single action, or if it is not cocked, double action will also fire it. And if you leave it cocked, it does have a nice decocking lever. I have a full video on the Sig P229 if you want to check that out. But this was the very first pistol designed for it, and I wish Sig would start making these again. As I mentioned before, one of the advantages of the 357 SIG is it fits in the same grip frame size as a standard 9mm handgun. So they use the same grip frame size. They do not need the larger grip frame size that you use for the 10mm or the 45 AARP. Oh, I'm sorry, 45 ACP. And yes, I'm of the AARP age, so I can make that joke. So, and also, you get a lot more rounds than you can with a 45. Same amount as the 10mm. So it just basically gives you a smaller grip that is more suitable for a lot of people. And remembering, when you're doing concealed carry, the barrel length and size really matters when you're sitting down, because it's all concealed all the time if you do inside the waistband. It's the grip that is the difficult part to conceal, so the smaller the grip, the better. So that's one of the other advantages of the 357 SIG. One interesting fact about the 357 SIG is originally it was supposed to actually have a 357 diameter bullet. But early on in development, they switched it to have a 9mm bullet. So in reality, it's a 355 SIG, not a 357 SIG. But let's face it, 357 is better for marketing than 355. And probably, I'm going to guess here, the reason they went with the 355 instead of 357 is they already had all the tooling for making 9mm diameter bores for barrels. They also had all the tooling for making ammo for 9mm. And so basically, it's just a little change in the shape of the bullet, but they don't have to change the diameter. So all their barrel equipment would be the same. All their broaching and other tools would be the same. All their presses would be the same. And to make one oddball a 357 when there really are no 357 handguns, minus, the Desert Eagle. But pretty much you don't see 357 Magnum semi-autos. So, interesting to note that it really was supposed to be 357, but it ended up being 355, which to me makes total sense from the manufacturing standpoint. You already have a large investment in all the tooling for doing what you need to make 9mm barrels, so why make it more difficult on yourself and have one oddball sized barrel like that? So in closing, once again, just wanted to mention again, this is the 357 SIG, a bottleneck cartridge, which are rare among handgun cartridges, and I think this was the latest of the bottleneck cartridges to be developed that has had any commercial success whatsoever. I do wish more handguns would be chambered in it. Right now, very few handguns are chambered in it, and it's hard to find even a used 357 SIG in the market. People who have them keep them, and they don't seem to be making more. I know they claim the cartridge is going obsolete, but I tend to think it's still one of the best cartridges out there for concealed carry. And remember, not everybody lives in the same area with the same problems. That is a problem with the tactical people on YouTube. They think we all live in the same urban environment that they do. I am more likely to have trouble with a bear or a moose than I am with a person. So the more power I have, the better. And in all honesty, most of the year when I carry, I'm carrying solids or hardball ammunition because I'm more worried about a moose, and hollow points meant for humans aren't going to get very far into a moose or a bear. Not a bear problem this time of year. It's late December. They're all asleep. But the moose are mean and they're big. So, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. And as always, have a good day and get out shooting.